The World Video Game Hall of Fame celebrates not just the best games of all time, but those that are the most influential.
These are games that really transcended how we play, how we learn, how we relate to one another.
The World Video Game Hall of Fame is our way of honoring those games that have made history.
Since the 1970s, video games have had a big impact on people.
These are the games that really belong on the Mount Rushmore of video gaming.
Here at The Strong, we not only preserve the actual games themselves, but game consoles, game formats, arcade games, and also design documents from the people who created the games that we love.
Every game that makes it into the World Video Game Hall of Fame must meet 4 criteria: icon status, influence, longevity, and geographical reach.
Is it recognizable? Do we remember it? Think the Waka Waka sound of Pac-Man or the mustachioed Mario figure.
Games which have impacted the video game industry, popular culture, and society.
With longevity, these are the games that have gone beyond just a single console generation or computer generation. These are the games that keep coming back again and again and continue to be enjoyed by people all over the world.
Video games are a global phenomenon, so therefore it's important to recognize those games that transcend boundaries, that cross borders. And geographical reach is the criterion that really signals, hey, this game is more important than in just one local area.
So when a game is inducted based on those criteria, it's really entering into a group of other games that are the most important games of all time.
This is it. Here we go. It's time to find out what games are going to be inducted into the World Video Game Hall of Fame class of 2021.
Fans have weighed in, the votes have been counted, our judges have decided. This year, we are about to welcome the newest inductees into the World Video Game Hall of Fame.
Our first inductee to the World Video Game Hall of Fame is a franchise that brings people together all over the world. Last year, the latest game broke digital sales records. Adults and kids love this game. And no matter where you go, you'll find a friend or a new neighborhood. How many games can you say are beloved by Frodo Baggins, Captain America, and Guy Fieri? The first inductee is Animal Crossing.
First released as the Japanese Nintendo 64 game Animal Forest, the enhanced Nintendo GameCube version, popularized as Animal Crossing, is an open-ended social simulation game with international mass appeal. In Animal Crossing, a player assumes the role of a human who moves to a new, randomly generated town inhabited by sentient anthropomorphic animals. After meeting Tom Nook, the player selects one of several unfurnished houses to establish their new residence, with the player completing tasks for other villagers to pay off their debt and to customize their game world. A player can choose to socialize with the other animal residents by talking, bartering, writing letters, sending gifts, or even playing hide and seek. Played in real time, the game observes days, weeks, months, and holidays using the GameCube's internal clock. As an open-ended life simulation game, Animal Crossing does not have explicit objectives. Players are truly free to do as they like. This freedom of play gave the game wider gender and age appeal than many other video game titles of the time. When the original game sold 2.7 million copies, it was inevitable there would be follow-ups. The latest installment to the series, 2020's Animal Crossing: New Horizons for Nintendo Switch, broke the console game record for most digital units sold in a single month, selling more than 31 million copies worldwide, as its virtual version of neighborly sociability engaged players isolated in the midst of a global pandemic.
Hi, I'm Nate Bildorf from the Treehouse at Nintendo of America. It's hard to believe it's been 20 years since the original Animal Crossing game launched in Japan for the Nintendo 64 system. It was then brought here to the US, where it made its debut on Nintendo GameCube the next year, which I definitely remember since it was one of the earliest games that I worked on. The memory of working on the localization of that first Animal Crossing is still fresh in my mind, and I remember vividly being worried about how it would be received. So it was wonderful to see fans react positively to the game's relaxing gameplay and memorable cast of animal villagers. At the time, it was such a novel concept to play a game that would change with the seasons and mimic the system's real-time internal clock. Truly a little world that lived on even when you weren't playing. Since the first game's debut, the series has spawned multiple entries on various Nintendo systems over the years, including the most recent game, Animal Crossing: New Horizons for Nintendo Switch. We hope that fans have been able to enjoy each version of the game, from the original all the way up until now. On behalf of everyone at Nintendo, thank you so much to The Strong for inducting the original Animal Crossing into the World Video Game Hall of Fame. And thanks to all the fans out there who love and continue to play the Animal Crossing series. Thank you.
This next inductee reminds us that people have always been fascinated by the idea of traveling through the clouds, high above the earth. Most of us are never going to get the opportunity to get in a cockpit and take control of a real, live aircraft. But this game got you and me just a little bit closer to that dream. Our next inductee into the World Video Game Hall of Fame is Microsoft Flight Simulator.
Thousands of amateur and professional aviators pursued their dreams of navigating machines through the sky, but most people experienced flying as passengers, not pilots. Microsoft Flight Simulator changed all that by giving millions of people a highly realistic simulation of piloting a real plane, all without leaving the comfort and safety of their computers. Bruce Artwick, its creator, developed a flight simulation program on the PDP-11 minicomputer for his master's thesis. After founding Sublogic Corporation with Stu Moment, he created A2FS1 Flight Simulator for the Apple II in 1979, becoming the best-selling flight simulator for its time. It is thus not coincidental that Microsoft decided to license a version of Artwick's creation. Artwick took advantage of increased processing power to add many new features to Microsoft Flight Simulator when it was released on November 11, 1982. The use of color made flying highly realistic, enabling the players to make choices while flying that echoed the way a real-life pilot made judgments. Its inclusion of an editor allowed the players to vary the scenarios by adjusting the weather and flight path. Since it operated in real time, a player who decided to fly from Chicago to Seattle needed to plan accordingly. Microsoft knew it had a hit on its hands, and in collaboration with Artwick and others, released a regular series of updates over the decades that followed. In 2020, Microsoft released a spectacular updated version of the game that used real-life images to give flyers the experience of soaring over their hometowns or visiting exotic locale, proving once again that the joy of flight is universal.
Hi, my name is Jörg Neumann. I'm the head of Microsoft Flight Simulator. The history of consumer flight simulation goes back all the way to 1977, when Bruce Artwick founded his company Sublogic and ultimately released Flight Simulator on the Apple II in 1979. This later evolved into Microsoft Flight Simulator 1.0, which was released in 1982. Since the very beginning, the series stood for realism, accuracy, and the authenticity of flying. In the 40 years since the first release, the series has undergone amazing innovations in graphics, the complexity of the flight model, and the authenticity of the world itself. We are often humbled and inspired when talking to many real-world pilots who tell us that Microsoft Flight Simulator was the reason they fell in love with aviation in the first place. As a team, we hope to inspire a future generation of aviators around the world. On behalf of all who have ever worked on this enduring franchise, we would like to thank The Strong for inducting Microsoft Flight Simulator into the World Video Game Hall of Fame. It's an amazing honor. Thank you.
The next game inducted into the World Video Game Hall of Fame is one that was celebrated for its single-player campaign, as it added new layers of complexity to the real-time strategy genre. But with its multiplayer mode, it was revolutionary, giving rise to the multi-billion-dollar esports industry that we see today. For me, I spent way too many late nights up with friends, yelling across the room saying, "No Zerg rushes this time," while we all planned our own Zerg rush. The next game inducted into the World Video Game Hall of Fame class of 2021 is Starcraft.
When Blizzard Entertainment began development on Starcraft in 1995, the real-time strategy genre was not new for the company. Released in 1998, Starcraft was more than just Warcraft in space. Set in the 25th century, Starcraft's campaign follows the Terrans, humans who have been exiled from Earth, as they colonize the far reaches of the Milky Way galaxy. While exploring, the Terrans encountered two different alien species, the Zerg and the Protoss. While the reception to Starcraft's campaign was positive, the game is perhaps best known for its multiplayer. Starcraft's races each have vastly different abilities and strengths, requiring players to develop unique strategies depending on races chosen. Different techniques emerged as players gained experience battling online, with techniques like the Zerg Rush transcending the game itself. Starcraft became the largest esport title of its time. Its popularity in South Korea, where the game sold over 50% of its copies, led to the launch of the Korea Esports Association in 2000 to officially sanction and organize tournaments, which were seen on national television. Starcraft is regarded as one of the best real-time strategy games of all time, with expansions, sequels, and licensed merchandise showing just how popular it is. By 2009, Starcraft, along with its expansion Brood War, had sold more than 11 million copies. Starcraft Remastered was released in August 2017, which added enhanced graphics but kept the gameplay mostly intact, introducing a new generation of players to the iconic game.
Hi, I'm Alan Adham, co-founder and senior vice president of product development at Blizzard Entertainment, and over 20 years ago, executive producer of Starcraft. When we released Starcraft in 1998, none of us could have predicted the overwhelming response from gamers around the world. For more than 2 decades now, players have competed head-to-head, multiplayer, or solo in the single-player campaign. In fact, Starcraft became so popular, it helped usher in the modern era of esports. But most importantly, Starcraft grew a community of passionate gamers with lifelong friendships all around the world. To our players, we thank you. Starcraft isn't just a real-time strategy game to us, though. It's a science fiction universe rich with stories and filled with unlimited possibilities. On behalf of everyone at Blizzard Entertainment, I'd like to thank the Strong for inducting Starcraft into the World Video Game Hall of Fame.
Do you like travel? Do you like solving mysteries? Do you like using your knowledge of world history and geography for good? Do you like learning things? That's actually the biggest secret about our final inductee. It's actually edutainment, covertly combining learning with gameplay. First released on 5¼ floppy disks for graphic-enabled home computers, this game exposed audiences to celebrated world landmarks, exotic countries, and of course, punny henchmen. Working their way up the ranks as agents of the Acme Detective Agency, players capture crooks employed by Vile, an international group of villains led by a certain lady in red. The somewhat surprising success of this game spawned an entire series of geography-based titles by Broderbund, and among other things, a popular, award-winning children's television game show with a mighty memorable theme song. Can you crack the case, Gumshoe? Sneaking around the world from Rwanda to Rochester is our final inductee into the World Video Game Hall of Fame. It's Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego?
Gumshoes first began pursuing this particular master thief in the 1985 release of Broderbund's Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, an educational game that made learning geography fun for millions of students. Broderbund programmer Dane Bingham was originally inspired by the text game Colossal Cave Adventure to create a streamlined adventure for children. Artists Lauren Elliott and Jean Portwood, along with the scriptwriter David Seifkin, shaped initial concepts into what would become one of the best-selling edutainment games. Carmen Sandiego introduced new audiences to celebrated world landmarks, exotic countries, and punny henchmen. Players, working their way up the ranks as agents of the Acme Detective Agency, hunted down crooks employed by Vile, an international group of thieves led by the mysterious Carmen Sandiego. The player works one case at a time, by first traveling to the country where the robbery has occurred and receiving hints about the thief's next destination. Referencing the World Almanac and Book of Facts, distributed with the game, was highly encouraged. After solving enough assignments, the player earns the chance to capture Carmen Sandiego herself. Within a decade, the first Carmen Sandiego game had sold more than 4 million copies, a number markedly boosted by teachers. The success of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego spawned an entire series of geography-based games, including versions set in the United States, Europe, and even North Dakota. Carmen's mythos grew along with the franchise, gaining her iconic red trench coat and fedora along the way. Children of the 1990s could also watch this game spring to life on the award-winning television game show Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. Between the still-growing video game franchise, including a Google Earth tie-in, and Netflix's popular Carmen Sandiego animated series that launched in 2019, Carmen is as recognizable as ever.
So there you are, the class of 2021 in the World Video Game Hall of Fame. Animal Crossing, Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, Starcraft, and Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's a great class. You can learn more by going to World Video Game Hall of Fame or coming here to the Strong in person to check out these great games. Thank you so much, and keep on playing.